Join the coven. I Hunt Reverse Vampires. A story written by Cecily 1987. Part 9. It's been a while since the last update. I will bring everybody back up to speed quick. So let me paint the picture for you, from left to right, and I will disguise my terror with a lot of dark humor. The stage is set in the middle of a dusty road with houses on both sides. In the middle of the road, you have the burning wreckage of the enemy soldiers and vehicles sympathetic to the drug king Conrad. Pan further right to me, Mika and Voss standing in front of the blazing wreckage. Mika and Voss have just been engulfed in a magical blackout grenade, while I'm standing outside of the dark bubble with the surprise and stupid look on my face. Further right is a rough circle of black-clad ninja dudes, two in front of us, looking very surprised with the blackout grenade obscuring their view. The rest of the ninjas are turning to look at us also. They have formed a ring around three individuals that are fighting. The three individuals fighting in the middle. The first one is the Nazi prick, Herr Drazen, stabbing Alejandro, my teacher, in the belly. The third man is a giant black-clad ninja with a silver wolf mask. He has swung in from the side to decapitate my teacher Alejandro, while Alejandro is being stabbed in the gut by Drazen. A little to the right, on the ground, is my teacher's head, Alejandro lying next to Conrad's also decapitated head. A foot right is Conrad's kneeling headless body. Next to the body is the screaming dominatrix, La Salina. So that's the freeze frame in time. I told you last time things pop off. Well, they do, so keep up. The two ninjas facing me had me dead to rights with a fancy gun I've never seen. I was going to make a desperate grab for my pistol on the ground, but they would have shot me multiple times before I could even reach it. I went for the pistol anyways, and they pointed their weapons at me, and right before I expect to feel the pain of bullets ripping me apart, they both scream and jerk their guns to the side. I grab the pistol easily and pop off 2 shots, one into each of their melons. I know it's not enough to kill the mobs, but they would be down for a while. Voss, with unnaturally quick instincts, already had bear-hugged Mika and dove backward with her, just as a magical hurricane-force wind blew the dust and flames into a flaming tornado between the black-clad enemies and us. On the other side of the flaming tornado, Drazen, Lobo, and La Salina got another surprise. It was La Salina who first smelled and felt the moisture on her clothes. Lobo looked down to see that Alejandro had pulled the pin on the flame grenade attached to his vest before he died. The grenade misted streams of highly flammable liquid everywhere. Drazen looked down at the headless body of Alejandro and let out a curse in German. Lobo grabbed his mistress and jumped away as the grenade switched to its second phase and sparked hot thermite. A white-hot explosion flared up the area, engulfing Alejandro's body. Drazen was inflamed as he jumped to the side, his fully engulfed body smashing through the wall of a nearby house. The magical whirlwind of fire created a good barrier between my team and the bad guys. The fire that had once engulfed and destroyed vehicles was extinguished, leaving blackened scrap material for us to hide behind. I slid in next to Voss and Mika, taking cover by the twisted metal. I peeked through the smoldering wreckage of the jeep to marvel at the whirlwind of fire. "Did one of you summon this?" I asked in amazement. "I didn't," Voss answered. "Nope," Mika said as we both looked at her. "It's some sort of witchery," she added. "We have to get out of here," Voss said as we all watched the swirling flames. "This whole operation has gone tits up." Loud female chanting was heard from the other side of the fire. The fire froze as if it was a freeze frame in time. Finally, it evaporated into smoke and blew out through the area, obscuring everyone's view. I could see it was La Salina chanting, hands clenched at her side, face furious. 3 of the ninja dudes were spraying down Lobo with fire extinguishers. He was on his knees, huffing. "Damn witches betrayed us," she screamed. "Why did you have to save the Amit pups?" I didn't know if she expected us to answer her, but I was just as confused as she was. I guess it would make sense that the witches were helping us. The ninjas acted like they couldn't look at me, similar to how I couldn't look directly at the 3 witches in the villa's bedroom. "Mika, look here," Voss said as he pulled out a burnt hunting rifle. "It matches my 7.62 rounds. Can you do some repair magic?" Mika nodded and began drawing symbols in the dirt, laying the rifle in the middle. Voss still had a bandolier of spare ammo, and so did Mika. The firestorm torched the 2 guys I shot in the head. An explosion from Alejandro's flame grenade got 3 more of them. "The big jerk is down, but so is Alejandro," I said with sadness as I scoped out the playing field. 6 more ninjas, the big wolf, and the hot chick still standing. That Nazi jerk is missing somewhere. The enemy had fallen back to the cover of their Hummers parked by the helicopter. Ninjas mounting the machine guns. Voss was sighting in the newly fixed rifle, and I had a suppressed pistol. The 3 of us huddled behind the burnt-out vehicles waiting to be slaughtered. And speak of the devil, Herr Drazen came kicking out of the collapsed house we had used for sanctuary earlier. His upper body was burnt deeply, making him appear like a ghastly zombie. All his blonde hair singed off. His chest a patchwork of black and red, blackened skin showing bloody red layers underneath. His lips curled in a terrible grimace. As he stalked out into the street, his aura burned a bright red, struggling to heal himself. He stared over at where we huddled behind the wreckage. Steam flowed off of him as he clenched and unclenched his fists. "Oh, he's back," I stated to the others flatly. I had never been so afraid of a teenager with a skin problem in my life. His head was a smooth pale again, and his snarl turned into a pout. "You 3 broke the rules. You interfered. I'm going to have to kill all of you now. No mercy from me," he screamed at us. "Pfft, bull, I was compelled," Mika argued. "I don't think he cares," I said back. He was almost fully healed now, his blonde hair twirling in a cowlick. Out of nowhere, Voss started unbuttoning his bandoliers and straps, eventually taking off his shirt. I was surprised by the sudden nudity. Mika's eyes sparkled. "I got to do something," he said with regret in his voice. "It's gonna hurt really bad." He pulled out a knife and put the tip to the pentagram tattoos on his chest over his heart. He looked at Mika, and I could see he was scared. "I'm gonna cut the blinding symbol apart. You have to cast a minor healing spell to reseal my skin when I say so. You will have to do it fast." He used a blade to cut his finger and handed the bloody blade back. "Use my blood for the magic," he told Mika. She nodded again, this time more confident. All Mika could do to begin prepping a healing speak in agreement. He looked at me and gave me a nod, like a "you know what to do" nod. He broke cover to walk out to Drazen. Drazen saw him and began stalking towards him. As previously stated, when I recount these stories, I may frame them in a humorous light, but that is just a coping mechanism. I was scared, and I had no idea what to do. His student comes out to die, the brat screamed at Voss, the skin from his burnt lips flapping grossly. I will take out all my anger on you, little lamb. You will not, Herr Drazen, or should I say Mr. 13, Voss yelled right back. This paused Drazen's forward movement. I am Voss Barlow of the Templar Knights, Order Purely Shisham, and I am the heir to the House of Blood Raven. Voss looked past Drazen to point at the Toltec henchmen standing further back by their vehicles. Your fight was with Conrad of Villa and Alejandro personally. If you transgress any further, you will be starting a war with Ahmet, the Vatican, and the oldest, most powerful noble house in this world. You need to call it a day, and we both return to our respective camps. We have learned our lesson. Toltec group is not to be trifled with. He stated this with a calm that impressed me. Ah, my Catholic savior, Drazen said sarcastically. Your people rescued me from my evil Nazi copters, then turned around to do the same experiment with you. He waved his arms dramatically at Voss. Unlike you, it didn't take me 80+ years for my balls to drop. Voss sneered back. I saw in Voss's face that he knew he had lost his temper. He steadied his voice and said, Me and you will get the chance to see who's the better experiment. But not today. Right now, we are leaving. I saw La Salina and Lobo whispering to each other. La Salina finally walked up next to Drazen with Lobo at her side. We will withdraw with Alejandro's and Conrad's remains. We don't fear Ahmet, but we don't want war with the Vatican and House Blood Raven, she told Voss sternly. Drazen was not impressed. He reached out to touch the pentagram on Voss's chest, and Voss recoiled away from his touch. So, the church has made a deal with the devil? He looked up at Voss. You were supposed to be my better, a bridge to unite all of us. Herr Drazen, you have fulfilled your contract. Whatever you do next is of your own volition, La Salina said. Lobo got the picture and stood between her and the glowing Drazen. Both La Salina and Lobo began walking hurriedly back to their men, La Salina shouting orders. I'll think I'll take that heart from you, Drazen sneered at Voss. I don't need it for peace or power. I just want to hurt Mother. I saw Voss tense up and throw a punch to knock Drazen 4 feet back. Drazen snarled, and his aura exploded with red fire. Voss quickly pulled out his boot knife and ran it down across the pentagram on his chest, blood gushing out of the wound. Voss later told me he had to make it deep. He had to rip the skin enough for the pentagram's power to fade. The pentagram was placed upon him to dampen the powerful heart he had inside of him. It was meant to let his body adjust to the power as he grew older. But now the seal was broken, and the immense magical power was let loose in his body. He screamed as a deep blood-red aura sprung from his body. He threw his head back and his muscles tensed to the point of snapping. The next moment, the awful power of Drazen met the wild, overwhelming power of Voss. Seems like a good place to stop for the next part. Don't worry, I tell you how we get out of this mess. And I got to ask Voss and Mika a few questions. Part 10. Hello everybody, I don't know how to start this. Mother told me to sharpen my speech and writing skills. She told me it would be important if I ever meant to bridge the gaps between worlds. This is Voss, by the way. Taylor pressured me to tell my side of the story. But none of you want to hear my backstory right now. You want to know how we escaped from Herr Drazen and the Toltec group. I won't lead you around with cliffhangers like Taylor does. He likes the attention it gets him. I will tell you about cutting the seal on my chest and the power inside me that began to eat me alive. I'm secure enough with my manhood to admit that I was mortified at the prospect of cutting the seal on my chest. I was told to never do this. I was told my body would be devoured like an ant falling into the sun. But that was years ago, when I was a child. I was stronger now. I had to in order to survive today and fulfill my destiny. You see, I don't have a normal human heart in my body. To explain further, I would have to go back hundreds of years. Just take my word for it right now, the heart in my body was far more powerful than any Mavericks. It was like having a nuclear reactor in my chest. I stood facing Drazen in the middle of the dusty street in Mexico. Upon slashing a deep cut through the pentagram on my chest, I could feel the burning energy raging outwards from inside my body. I realized my human body hadn't adjusted to its immense power yet. I had little time, so I had to end this fight fast. Drazen seemed to move in slow motion, his right fist arcing towards me. I threw my own right fist back at him. I intercepted his fist with my own, exploding his hand in a mess of gore. I delivered a brutal left hook to his face, catching his jaw and dislodging it off one side of his face to hang like a loose scrap of meat. I saw Drazen's eyes widen as he stared at me, a look of terror over his young face. He knew he was about to die. Maybe he had never felt this sensation before. Before I could smash his scrawny head, I first had to projectile vomit. I doubled over and cleared my stomach contents all over the ground. I was horrified to see blood and a few of my teeth in the sick puddle. I looked up in time to see a kick flying into my face. More teeth were knocked out of my mouth as I spiraled backwards across the dirt. As I skidded to a halt, I realized how much pain was racing through my body. How could my body ever acclimate to this? I felt a knee land in my belly and punch splatter my nose across my face. I stared through blurry eyes up at the jawless face of Drazen, forked tongue hanging out as he landed blow after blow down on me with his remaining hand. To be truthful, Taylor will think this is me just bragging, but his punches didn't even register through the pain that I was resonating from inside me. His punches were more of an annoyance. I reached up and grabbed him by his left shoulder and ripped off his remaining left arm like it was made of paper mache. Drazen screamed. His forked tongue flailed wildly. The armless freak jumped back up to his feet and began stomping on my face. He must have been in the same amount of pain as me about now, but he kept his laser focus on killing me. 3 coughs from a suppressed pistol met my ear through all the pain. Holes appeared in his face and blew brains out the back of his head. He fell backwards to collapse away from me. "Do it, Mika!" I heard Taylor scream. "Heal his magic chest thingy." Taylor appeared over me, blocking out the sun, burning my blood-filled eyes. I felt him grab me by the back of my vest and began pulling me backwards to the safety of cover. I could see his hand outstretched, pointing an empty pistol in the direction of Drazen and the Toltec group. I could hear Mika fervently chanting, and the overwhelming pain of my magic heart, boiling my body from within, vanished as the pentagram was healed back together. I was just left with the pain of having my face almost caved in. I was sucking for air and began shaking. Mika ordered Taylor to roll me on my side. I coughed up my last remaining teeth and the rest of the blood and bile in my mouth. "Do what you can for him," I heard Taylor say. "I'm gonna finish off that Nazi." I was told later Taylor grabbed the only remaining rifle and approached Drazen to either bash his head in or shoot it with something powerful enough to obliterate the brain. Taylor was intercepted by Lobo on La Salina's orders. Lobo had the ruined but slowly healing body of Drazen slumped over his shoulder. Turns out bullets to the brain slowed down the healing in a Mavrip to a crawl. La Salina yelled to Taylor that the fight was over, and Drazen was still useful to the Toltec group. Taylor made the smart decision and allowed Lobo to take Drazen back to the helicopter. The Toltec group peeled out and left immediately, leaving us stranded in the village. Mika desperately attempted first aid on me. The heart in my body would begin to heal me instead of hurt me now that the steel was healed again. After about 30 minutes, I sat up and ran my hand through my hair. Giant clumps of my dark hair fell out as I did. It was okay. Hair would go back, but teeth? "You're going to tell us what all that was about," Mika demanded. I sat up and told them the little I could tell before violating my oath of secrecy. First, I explained how Herr Drazen was the 13th of 20 kids rescued by Allied forces from Nazi scientists during the war. The Allies were led by a special contingent of Templar commandos from the Vatican. The children were injected with Mavrip DNA in the womb. The Nazis wanted to create hybrids that had the traits of ancient Mavrip without having to wait hundreds of years. They also wanted each child to have autonomy and to be able to make decisions for themselves. Strange for the Nazis to want their child experiments to have free will, but they were supposed to be the new leaders of the Reich when they grew up. The Nazis had accomplished their missions with eugenics, but the children aged at a very slow rate. They stayed infants for 20 years. 80 years later, and Drazen was just hitting puberty. So obviously creating an instant army of hybrid superhumans was out of the question. I told them all of this to tell them about why Drazen hated me so much. I was born a normal human. The Vatican adopted orphan children to raise as warriors in the fight against unholy forces of invading realms. I was one of these children adopted by the Vatican. I was born with a genetic defect in my heart. By the time I was 10 years old, my heart was already worn down and giving out on me. Surely I would have been dead before my 11th birthday. I received a heart transplant from an ancient being, a noble. This being was far older than any Mavrip and originated from another plane of existence entirely. She had been standing in our world for millennia. I can't tell you much about her right now, but I called her Mother, the heir to the house, Blue Draven. For centuries, the Church has been at war with magical forces and beings from outside our dimension. This war has saved a lot of lives, but also damned a lot of innocent ones. Mother made a pact with a more open-minded sect of Church to give me her heart. Mother was tired of living and wanted to do something good with her death. She had caused so much pain and suffering in her long life, she knew she would never atone for it. But maybe I could. I would be a bridge between the Church and all things supernatural. I could lead to greater peace and cooperation between the many warring groups and clans. It would only take me around 300 years for me to adjust to the noble heart burning within me. After being trained in secret for 8 years, the Church finally found out about me. To keep me safe, a deal was quickly struck with the Amit clan for me to join as a hunter for the next 4 years. That's why Drazen just saw me as another experiment, another super soldier in league with Amit and the Vatican. The church's attempt to one-up the Nazis. Rumors of my existence have permeated all corners of the underworld already. This had undoubtedly hurt Drazen's fragile ego. After I told my story, we all moved to one of the houses to take shelter. We all agreed to stay and recuperate for the day. If rescue hadn't shown up in the morning, we would have to hike back on foot. It was around midnight as we hunkered down in a house lit by candlelight. Micah had found some canned food from before all the residents were turned into mobs, and was heating them up in a fire pit she had made on the dirt floor of the living room. I laid on a cot, still thoroughly exhausted, and Taylor stood by the window watching the villa still smoldering in the distance. "Witches helped us out there," he announced to the room. Micah turned to look at him, questioning. I didn't have the strength to waste on him. "Unless it was you, Mika," he said. "Those ninja dudes had the drop on all of us when your blackout grenade went off. But they all spazzed out and acted like looking at us hurt them. The same thing happened inside the villa to me. When I tried to shoot the witches, I couldn't look or point my weapon at them, the same way the ninjas acted with us on the street." "It wasn't me," Mika answered. "That's some high-level protection magic." "Why would those three set us up for an ambush, then help us survive the ambush?" I asked with my eyes still closed. The thing I heard next made me shoot up in a standing position, ready to defend myself. "We just wanted the money, stupid boy," came an old woman's voice. My head pounded as I searched the room for her. Taylor spun and leveled his rifle in all corners of the room. "The boy with the pentagram is important to us, and you and this girl are important to his growth," came the witch's voice from Mika's lips. We both stared at her as her eyes rolled back in her head and she shook slightly. She turned to smile at me. "So, will you remember the debt you now owe us when we meet again, handsome?" Before I could think of what to do, Mika started shaking even more violently. Her pupils rolled back down, and she let out a primal growl. "Those witches!" she screamed in her own voice. She immediately pulled out a stick of chalk out of her pocket and started drawing a circle in the middle of the living room floor. "I'm going to put up a protection circle. You both need to pack in with me." So minutes later, we all sat back to back with our knees up within a circle of protection. The worst part was we had left the food out of reach of the circle. Taylor must have risked his own safety for the food, because after I woke up for my shift, our food had somehow entered the circle. I tried to stay awake with the two of them. If the witches were telling the truth, these two were important to my future. Maybe I needed to get closer to them. It is difficult because I've always felt out of place around them, like I didn't belong. I don't think I belong anywhere. Somehow I was supposed to be a bridge between different people and clans, but I couldn't even start up a normal conversation with my teammates. People seem so trifling and concerned with silly things, in my opinion, especially Taylor. Taylor was always joking, always filling the blank spaces with the sound of his own voice. People liked him because he propped up their fragile egos, even though he was mediocre at just about everything he did. I know he will read this, and I don't care. The things I say are not out of spite. They are just factual observations I have made. I'm not writing this to make him feel good. I am a man that would live for around 300 years, maybe 1,000, maybe even forever. I see things from a perspective other humans didn't see them from. The answer to most problems was always the straightest path, the most brutal path. I require no finessing and beating around the bush to get to the obvious solution. I had more time than any human alive, but I still had no place for wasting time. The conversations, I would always end up insulting whoever I was talking to. Speaking was only useful to relay in order or get answers to questions asked. I had no time for pleasant conversation, and pretending I cared what the other person was saying. So most of the time I wouldn't say anything. People were too easily offended when I just wanted to get to the point. Anyways, I did keep falling asleep throughout the night. I tried to listen to the details of Taylor and Mika's conversation. All I knew was Taylor was asking Mika about magic, specifically tracking spells. Taylor explained to Mika that a hunter had placed tracking spells on him and his late brother the day he was first attacked by Mavericks. Mika told him she didn't know of any spell that could consistently track a live human. Mika said she only knew spells to give the locations of stationary objects, or scrying spells that gave you the location of the targeted person the moment you performed the spell, but couldn't continuously track the target. Taylor began to get upset for some reason. So how did Ma put a spell on us to keep track of us on the day we were attacked? She knew we were in danger. She came to rescue me moments after my brother was killed. Mika was quiet for a while. We were all propped up against each other back to back, and I felt her shoulders tense. You can magically bait an object or person, she said slowly. Me and my father would do it to animals when hunting shifters and skinwalkers. Magic attacks magic. Magically baiting something will cause magical creatures to take a greater interest. It pulls the fate of magical creators closer to each other. It's similar to being charmed, how magical creatures and those baited draw closer subconsciously, but you can resist it easier if you notice it. Now Taylor tensed. She told me she used us as bait. I thought she meant she had just kept an eye on us, assuming the Mavericks would attack us. But what you're saying is she could have intentionally attracted the Mavericks to us so she could kill them? She caused the death of my brother? I'm not saying any of that for sure, Taylor. What makes you suspect this Ma used devious tactics that day? It was Mark, Taylor said quietly. He spoke to me on the night we performed summoning rituals out in the desert. He told me not to trust her. There's a spell we can perform to see if you were baited, Mika answered in a measured voice. It's out of my league of skill. But we can find somebody. The spell is like a search history on yourself for any spells or curses performed on you. This seemed to shut Taylor up so I could sleep. He was moody and quiet for the rest of the night. I wasn't complaining. We would make the hike out the next morning and be picked up by Amit forces hours later. Taylor and Mika never got to perform the spell they were talking about. As soon as we made it back, we were sent on another hunt back in the States. We would be assisting Ma and her daughter, and Taylor would get the answers he needed. Part 11. Hey, this is Voss again. I know Taylor will continue telling about our exploits with the New Orleans case, but I need you to understand some things before he continues. I need you to understand why I did the things I did. When I first read this, it terrified me to think the Ma we thought we knew was not the person she really is. You will also get to read of her terrifying first encounter with Mavericks and the horrible loss of family. It took me a while to track down an unredacted personnel file of Ma's, but here's part of it. It gives a good overview of what I need you to know. But I have more files if you want to continue reading up on Ma's first encounter with Mavrips. The following is 2 case files I've spliced together for easier reading. Voss. Internal Amit clan document, not to be circulated or read by any personnel with less than a top secret clearance. Subject, Miranda Crawford, alias Ma. Date of birth, 02/24/1973. Affiliation, Amit clan. Occupation, hunter, killer, master rank. Specializing in Mavrip behavior, tracking, and combat-oriented spellcraft. Magic affinity and proficiency level, expert. Known acquaintances, team members, hunter-killer apprentice, Celia Straub, niece. Date of birth, 09/14/1995. The following is the unaltered and unredacted report of Miranda Ma Crawford during an in-depth background investigation into her first encounter with Mavrips and subsequent recruitment into the Amit clan by Council Member Rafe. In the summer of August 11th, 1999, 4 subjects, Miranda Crawford, her sister Vicky Straub, and brother-in-law William Straub, and niece 3-year-old Celia Straub, were camping in the Oregon mountains. The 3 were staying for the weekend at their late mother's cabin, which now belonged to the 2 sisters. On the 3rd day, William and Vicky Straub were out in the woods, taking a walk while Miranda babysat Celia back in the cabin. While on the walk, Vicky and William came across the Vogue Mavrip and former evangelist Luther Lacrosse and his pack of 4 half-turn Mavrips. See file 1999-012254 for report on Luther Lacrosse. The following is an excerpt from classified file 1999-012254. Luther Lacrosse was originally part of the Heteze clan before his master, Job Washington Green, was killed by Amit forces for the crime of illegal trafficking of humans and creating unapproved progenies. Once Job was executed, his mental bonds to his progenies was severed, sending most of them into hiding. Luther Lacrosse was captured by the Amit clan with 2 others of Job Green's illegal progenies in the compound Job and his followers had built. Luther Lacrosse was discovered to be an undocumented and unapproved progeny, like his other sibling Mavrips in his brood. Reports show Job Green used his hidden and unapproved progenies to pose as religious ministers to recruit humans to either turn, sell, or feed upon himself. Job Green was alleged to have sired 7 illegal progenies over the span of 200 years. 3 were taken into custody the night Job Green was killed by Amit forces. Luther and the other 2 progenies were released from mental control upon Job's death. When Luther was taken into custody, and during his interrogation he admitted he knew that he was doing was cruel and wrong. Luther informed us he was around 154 years old and was beginning to be aware of the atrocities he was committing. Luther informed us he was planning to push back against his master Job when he was strong enough to resist his mind control. Luther asked about the well-being of the humans we had rescued from the compound. He knew all their names and intimate details about them. He advised us one of the humans needed emergency heart medicine to survive, and one of the humans was newly pregnant and should be looked at by a medical professional. He also advised us that one man had expressed thoughts of suicide to him in confidence, and wanted the boy looked after more carefully. He asked to see the rescued humans to apologize, but was denied his request. Not only did Luther express concern and regret about their enslavement, He also led us to other human slave camps, cattle farms in the area. Luther was fully cooperative and gave us tips, leads on other illegal operations in the area. One of the illegal progenies Job had fostered, Luther helped us track down all but one, Alberta Waits, the oldest of the progenies. Luther explained she was the most distant towards the rest of the illegal progenies, and he didn't really know her. It appears this was a lie. Luther escaped his minimum security detention area with outside help, leaving 2 dead human security guards in the process. The following excerpts are the continuation of Miranda Ma Crawford's personnel profile. William and Vicky Straub were most likely compelled by Luther's mind control to go back and gather any remaining humans to be brought to Luther to be fed upon. Miranda later said in an interview, "It was strange to see her sister and brother-in-law returning so early from their usually long walks through the trails." Miranda had just put her niece to bed for a nap, so she met the 2 outside so they didn't wake the child with the front door. Miranda said her brother-in-law and sister expressed the desire to go into town and visit the local bar, and they urged Miranda to get in the car and join them on their trip. Miranda was immediately suspicious of the 2's strange behavior, stating her sister and brother-in-law were never the drinking type, especially when they had their child. Also, neither of them showed any remorse about leaving their only child alone and unattended, as they went drinking in the middle of the day. Miranda stated she agreed to go with the 2 of them in an attempt to get them away from the child asleep in the house. Miranda said they seemed to have a faraway look and were adamant about Miranda coming with them. Miranda accompanied the 2 in their old Dodge Neon. Miranda quickly realized they were not heading towards town, but deeper into the woods. William drove them to eventually arrive at a cabin currently being used as a hideout by Luther and his half-turned brood. Miranda attempted to escape, but was captured by Luther's half-turned and her sister Vicky. Miranda inflicted an injury upon Vicky's right leg during the struggle that resulted in Miranda's capture. Miranda, William, and Vicky were kept chained together in the basement of the cabin. Miranda said Luther tried to compel Miranda not to struggle on multiple occasions with no success. Miranda has shown a strong mental defense to being compelled by Mavericks. Vicky and William were therefore handcuffed to Miranda, with Miranda being in the middle, with Vicky and William handcuffed to each of her wrists. Miranda later attested that Luther compelled Vicky and William to stop her if she tried to escape. Miranda said that this was one of the reasons she had to leave her sister behind when she made her eventual escape. I have a different theory in the series of events, but I will hold my opinion until the end of my report. On the first night of their captivity, Luther and his brood unhandcuffed William and brought him upstairs to feed upon. Miranda knew she would most likely be next and began to work on her escape plan. Miranda says she had to fight with her sister and knock her out. Miranda says once her sister was subdued, she took a rock and smashed Vicky's thumb to the point where she could slide the cuffs off Vicky's mangled hand. Miranda then opened and squeezed through a basement window that was at least 8 feet off the ground. I came across Miranda midday about 5 miles from her and her sister's cabin. Miranda had traveled 10 miles on foot to backtrack her way to the cabin. When I found her, I had tried to convince her to take me to Luther's hideout right away. Miranda refused to take me or give me any information until we returned to our cabin and checked on her niece. I tried to compel her to obey me, and it had no effect on her. She even attacked me when she realized what I was trying to do. I had to hold her down and compel her to be calm. I told her I would not use my mental charm on her anymore, and we could check on her niece before I went after Luther. Whether by mental compelling or my words, she calmed down, and I accompanied her to her cabin. I stayed outside while she went in to console her terrified niece. Miranda eventually returned to the porch with a hunting rifle and machete. Miranda demanded I take her along so she could rescue her sister. She refused to tell me where Luther was or how many half-turned were with him, unless I brought her along. I was considerably slower with Miranda in tow, but she kept up with me as best as she could. We ran across 2 of Luther's half-turned on the trail hunting down Miranda. I removed the head from the shoulders of a female half-turned. Miranda landed a headshot on the second half-turned, downing the hostile long enough for me to hack its head off. I suspect Miranda must have received military training at some point in her life. Once we approached Luther's cabin, I informed Miranda that Luther would have sensed the deaths of his broodmates and would be expecting an attack. Miranda told me that there were at least 2 more half-turned residing in the residence with Luther. Miranda suggested we go around the house and use the basement window to infiltrate the cabin from the basement stairway. I agreed, and Miranda took me around to the side of the cabin to the broken ground level window she had used to escape. At this point, I must mention that I smelled and clearly saw blood spatter of yet an unknown female outside the house, near the basement window. I later identified and matched the blood scent with the deceased Vicky Straub. This does not match up with the story Miranda told me about leaving Vicky incapacitated in the basement. Furthermore, the drop into the basement had no furniture stacked near it that would have allowed Miranda to hoist herself outside to freedom without being considerably difficult for the 5'4" woman. Meanwhile, as we gained access to the basement, we slowly made our way to the stairs leading up to the house. The door at the top was locked and deadbolted. This was little concern to me, and the strength innately granted to our kind. We quickly made entry into the main room after I rammed the door down. We caught Luther and his remaining 2 half-turned completely by surprise. I engaged the 2 half-turned with my custom Taurus Judge 5-shot revolver, loaded with custom incendiary rounds. I quickly eliminated the 2 half-turned and observed Miranda engaging Luther. It looked to me like she was intentionally shooting him in the limbs to cause him pain and make him suffer. She dumped round after round into him as he slumped in the corner of the cabin. His maverick body was trying its best to heal between taking more gunshot wounds. I realized what she was doing, and I also wanted him alive for questioning, so I chopped off his arms and legs. I removed a custom-built welding torch from my pack and cauterized the bloody ends of his stumps to slow down his rate of healing considerably. At this point, I expected Miranda to ask Luther about her sister or where the body of her brother-in-law was located. Miranda asked no questions. She was so enraged she had just attacked Luther and began punching him in the face repeatedly. I believe she already knew her sister was dead and didn't care to ask questions. I had to stop Miranda so I could ask my questions, or she would have caved his skull in. I asked Luther about the whereabouts of his brood sibling Alberta Waits. Luther refused to answer any of my questions, so I allowed Miranda to continue torturing him. We continued our torture/interrogation of Luther for the next 3 hours. I found the blood-drained bodies of William and Vicky Straub stacked on top of each other in the side bathroom. This only made Miranda more vicious in her torture. I continued asking Luther about the whereabouts of Alberta, and could see in his eyes he was about to break. I have conducted hundreds of interrogations in my career in the Amit clan, and Luther showed all the signs of breaking. as I pushed him further and further until something changed within him. He began sobbing loudly and appeared distraught, ignoring all of my questions. Luther began crying desperately for his mother. Miranda began laughing at him and chiding him. Miranda told him, "I'm your only ma here, jerk." Luther stated verbatim, "I wasn't going to give you up, Mama. Why have you forsaken me? Why have you cut me off, Mama? Wait!" Upon further consideration, I realized Luther might have been saying Mama waits, not Mama wait. It was my belief that Mama waits is Alberta waits. Luther was referring to Alberta as his master, and not his brood sibling. Luther was distraught because Alberta had severed her mental connection over him, therefore removing the ability of Luther disclosing her location. My theory is Luther's master was not Job Green, but Alberta Waits. My theory further suggests Alberta was Job Green's master as well. Alberta used Job as the false leader of the brood, while she worked in the shadows under the pretense of being a mind-controlled servant. Alberta's plan worked because the Amit clan assassinated Job, thinking him the master, allowing Alberta to escape. She severed her mental connection with all her progenies to make it appear as if their master was dead. I believe she only kept connection with her favorite disciple, Luther Lacrosse. Once we pushed Luther to the point of giving up her location, she mentally knew of his eventual betrayal and finally severed her connection from him, leaving him feeling empty and without purpose. This theory is held by me and my master in the council. We will conduct further investigation into who Alberta Mama Waits is, and how long she has been operational. Luther locked up on me and no longer answered further questions. I carried out my orders and executed Luther with 2 shots to the face. After his execution, I denied Miranda's request to retrieve her sister and brother-in-law for burial. I informed her a cleanup team was on the way, and protocol dictated the bodies would be incinerated. After sending in my preliminary report via cell phone, the cleanup team met us back at Miranda's cabin. I fully expected the cleanup team to wipe the memories of Miranda and her niece, but orders came in from council member Rafe to hold off on the mind wipe. It is my belief Rafe is considering Miranda as a new hunter. I adamantly oppose the decision of bringing humans into the hunter positions, especially this one. I know Rafe shares the liberal views of incorporating humans into the affairs of the Amit clan, but she is stubborn and shows disrespect to me, her maverick superior. Surely a more docile human would serve better in non-combat roles. Lastly, Miranda's stories of events didn't add up. She would have needed the help of her sister to reach the high window to escape the basement. Also, Vicky's blood was found outside the house when Miranda said she left her in the basement. My second theory in this report is that Miranda convinced her sister to help lift her to the high window. Once they both got outside, Miranda realized Vicky would slow her down due to the previous injury to Vicky's leg, which would get them both killed. Whether they both agreed to leave Vicky behind or Miranda did it by force, she broke Vicky's thumb to escape the cuffs outside the cabin. But if Vicky did agree to letting Miranda destroy her hand so Miranda could escape, why didn't Miranda tell me this when we met? It would seem Miranda did it for the altruistic reason of getting back to her niece and calling for help. Unless Miranda left this out because she left her injured sister behind against her sister's wishes. This is why I urge any member of the council to reject the idea of bringing Miranda Crawford into the clan as a hunter apprentice. Master Hunter Julius Amand. End of report. in-depth background, psychological, and physical investigation of Miranda Crawford by the Amit Entrance Board grants the before-named subject entrance into the Amit clan at the rank of apprentice hunter. Subject was previously highly trained as a firearm instructor and tracker in the U.S. Army before being dishonorably discharged for insubordination. Subject shows signs of narcissistic and sociopathic tendencies. Standard operating procedures suggest subject to be mind-wiped and discharged from Amit custody. Subject was subsequently reapproved for clan membership and pushed through by council member Rafe. That's all I have for now. I'm looking for Miranda's report on the incident. Maybe I'll attach it at the end of Taylor's entry next time. Voss.